question for you guys. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he gave me a pretty good topic for today. And he was telling me that he thought that Larry Bird was just slightly overrated. He thought that Bird was a tremendous player, but he thought that in today's game, Bird would not be as dominant as he was back in the 80s. And I disagreed. Um, I'd like to know your guys' thoughts about this topic. If you took Larry Bird and you put him in today's game, how do you think he would fare? um, I think, first of all, nutrition and technology, all of this stuff is far more advanced than it was in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. Um, there have probably been different treatments available. There's various treatments available now that would have extended Bird's career even further than it was back then. Instead of him having to retire at age 35, he might have played till he was 38. He probably been a little bit even more productive during those decline years than he was. Um, I think Bird was 6'9", 220. The last couple of years, you guys may have noticed that Bird looked like he had put on a little weight. He looked a little bit more puffier. That was because he was taking steroid treatment for his back. Um, so I guess in those years he may have been more like 235. Uh, I think that Bird would probably play more along the range of about 240 now, just because players are a little bit bigger. He probably a little bit more into weight training. He was always, because he knew that he wasn't as physically gifted as other players, he was always dedicated to staying in tip-top shape. That would have not changed. If anything, it might be even more a strength of his because players today are much more physically athletic than they were in the 80s. But Bird's game was never predicated on his physicality. His game was predicated more on his extraordinarily high basketball IQ, arguably one of the highest ever, if not the highest ever basketball IQ in a league that sorely lacks that now. Fundamental soundness, that's something that's kind of lacking now in today's game. Uh, but what are some of his weaknesses? Okay, this is why I don't think he would suffer at all. I think, in fact, his game would be even more enhanced. The defenses now favor perimeter shooters. Bird wasn't, despite his reputation as being a long-distance bomber, Bird didn't really like taking that shot. And he didn't start really shooting three-pointers with great regularity until the late 80s. Maybe a little bit mid-80s, but late 80s, early 90s. That's when Bird really started taking that shot. His career percentage was 37.6%, though the years when he really wasn't taking that shot kind of skew his percentage because he came into the NBA shooting that shot with great regularity for those times, 79, 80. But from about 81 to about 85, he didn't really he didn't take that shot. I think many players didn't even respect that shot. It wasn't until about the time he was 29, 30 years old that he really started utilizing that shot as a weapon. Really, I see Bird as a career 40% three-point shooter. I think in today's era, with the way that the defenses are, uh, with zone defenses and whatnot, I think he would be more about 42, 43% from beyond the arc. I think he'd be even a better three-point shooter than he was then. I think he would probably be a bomber shooting 5, 6, 7 three-pointers a game. But not just taking threes. He was a great shooter all around. He wouldn't have quite the same defense on him as was back then. And this is why I think Bird would be even better. He had a nose for rebounding, despite the fact that he wasn't the most athletic guy. He averaged 10 rebounds a game for his career versus LeBron, who only averages 7 and some change. Um, and I also think that you got to look at competition. When Bird played, he was going against great small forwards. That was truly the era of great small forwards. You had James Worthy, you had Dominique Wilkins, Julius Irving. Okay, you had Adrian Dantley, Alex English, the older Cliff Robinson, not the one that played with Portland. Okay, Marquise Daniels. You know, I think by that time Gervin was a small forward, maybe. If not, he was going against Mike Mitchell, Larry Keenan, Bernard King, uh, Kelly Tripucka. Every team, even though Kelly Tripucka wasn't a great defensive player, but he could score. You know what I mean? Every team had a small forward who could get you some buckets, and Dave Roundfeld with the Atlanta Hawks, if I ever said him, one of the most underrated players in NBA history. Tragically drowned in Aruba back in 2012. Every team had a very good Mark Aguirre, if I haven't mentioned him. You get what I'm saying? Every team, I mean, we have LeBron and Durant, but back then, like every team had a good small forward. And Bird going against great competition night in and night out. He wouldn't have to do that in today's basketball. He wouldn't have to work so hard. He was, that what ended his ended his career prematurely was the fact that he had to hustle so hard that was the way he played. He would still be like that, but he wouldn't have to work so hard and bang up his body year in and year out. I see a guy, especially with today's NBA, the way the scores are inflated. I guess you could take the 80s, they were kind of inflated too. But he pretty much would average the same numbers. I think he would average a little bit more points. I think he would have seasons averaging 29, 30 points a game, maybe 10, 11 rebounds, 6, 7 assists. I think he would be that type of player. He'd probably shoot well over 50% each year. He would be a guy that I think he'd be the same guy. I think he'd just be a little bit bigger. He wouldn't have to work as hard defensively. Back then, Bird always prided himself on playing the team's best player oftentimes. Today, you have specialists who will guard the other team's guys, so the superstar doesn't have to wear himself out like LeBron, at times, or other guys. But I think Bird would be even better in most ways today than he was then. But that's just my opinion. Tell me what you guys think.